Okay, welcome to our February 22nd, 2022, 2 o'clock commissioners meeting for our consent agenda. It is 2 o'clock. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present, as well as our executive management team. With that, there is one item that I do know that I do want to take separately today, item number 2B, that is presented on today's agenda. Other than that, is there any other items that either of the other commissioners would like to take separately? Okay, seeing none, and the reason why I do want to take that separately is that is a lease agreement between Spokane County and with Hutton Settlement, and I am on the board of Hutton Settlement, so I will be recusing myself from that vote. So that's why I would like to take that one separately. Seeing that's the only one, I would look to my fellow commissioners for a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move that we approve items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all the sub items contained thereunder, except for item 2B, like in boy.
I will second the motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve items number 1, 2, 3, 4, and all sub items on today's agenda, except for item number 2B as in boy. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. And now I'll take a motion for item number 2B.
So Madam, I would move that we approve item 2B, like in boy, as it appears on today's agenda.
I will second the motion.
We have a motion and a second for item number 2B as presented on today's agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And I again will recuse myself from this vote, so it passes 2-0. I don't know how Gina will have to help me as to what we put on the my signature line for that. And then stamps for Brenda is able to use my stamp for today. Assuming Josh, until we get past our Open Public Meetings Act being open again, that is true for you as well. Okay, with that, then that takes us to our very quick 2 o'clock consent agenda and moves us on to Mike Burgess. Mike is probably not on yet. Oh, I see he is on. Very good. There we go.
Yes. How are you?
Thank you, Mike.
Listeners? I have an agenda I sent to you that I'm sure, there you go, Ron, can be counted on. Give you some updates on legislation, where some things are. These are issues that we've talked about. This is not a time and session where there's a lot of new developments in terms of new policy bills, but we've shifted a lot to budget. Interestingly, I'm sure you've read, but so we saw transportation budgets come out last week. One of the two capital budgets came out, and then both that last week. And then yesterday, it's a little unprecedented. Both the House and Senate released their operating budgets on the same day. That doesn't normally happen. Normally what they would do is, one of them would release it on a Monday and the other one would wait till Thursday or even go the week later. The week later is usually in a longer session though. So anyway, a little bit cramped and spent a lot of time yesterday trying to learn what was in those budgets and have was able to skim most of it. Have some information for you, but it will be incomplete. There's so much to digest. So I tried to pick off the areas that we had talked about or prioritized on our agendas. Session does have, it ends 2 weeks from Thursday. So just to give you an idea of where we're at from a time frame standpoint, I would expect both the House and Senate to pass their budgets off their respective floors. I think I heard the Senate's going to do theirs Friday. The House will do theirs on Saturday. That's operating budgets. Don't know yet about when the House will pass the transportation budget. They will move it from committee tomorrow. And then my guess is off the floor as soon as they can. So that's just kind of a lay of the land of where we're at. Just want to run through these bills. 1799, that's the organics legislation. It did have its public hearing last week and is set to be moved from committee tomorrow on the reducing of emissions for the outdoor power equipment. I think I had mentioned last week that the bill had sat quiet, that not a lot had happened, but it did receive a hearing last week, or excuse me, yeah, last week, and then is going to be that was in the finance committee, has not been scheduled for committee vote yet, but the bill is assumed as revenue or is assumed in the House budget. So that makes me think that they're counting on passing it at some point, and then we'll have to see what the Senate does with it. That would have to be taken up on the Senate side before the end of session. It is the kind of bill, though, that isn't necessary or subject to cutoffs because it does have a fiscal impact to it. So that could be in play until the end if the Senate does, in fact, want to take it up and the House passes it. 1703, that's that modernizing 911 communications. It has moved its way to the Senate floor. So keep in mind that is a House bill that has moved itself that far. So that bill is moving along in the process very well. And you'll remember that bill's a good bill, updates 911 communication, some of the statutes and some additional flexibility. The next one we talked about last week, 5042, this is actually a holdover from last session that deals with the timelines or the effective dates, certain actions taken under the Growth Management Act. I think some people have loosely referred to this as a vesting bill this year. It would freeze developments from going forward if there was a challenge or an appeal in process. I did notify committee members that we were opposed to that bill, but I do believe it's going to continue to move forward as session continues. 5901, the economic development tax deferral issue that Commissioner Kearns, you had testified in favor of that bill. It's moving along. It was assumed in the Senate's budget. So much like that emissions, the power equipment bill on the House side, this bill was assumed in the Senate's budget. So I would look for that bill to ultimately move and be part of the final solution to the budget and what's passed this session. It does not have a huge fiscal note. So obviously when something doesn't cost a lot, it does make it a little bit easier to do. And then 5853, the leasing of certain DOT property. That bill has a committee hearing in transportation on the 25th. So that's kind of the quick run through of the policy legislation. Commissioners, do you have any question there before I jump on to talking about some of the budget items? Okay, I'm going to keep going. I guess I already did touch. Oh,
Mike,
sorry,
it looks like
Commissioner
Commissioner
French.
French.
So, Mike, on 5042, you indicated that the construction trades and real estate groups are in opposition to that, but the environmental groups and FutureWise are in favor of it.
Also, yeah, in addition to being opposed to the groups you mentioned, Commissioner, Association of Counties, and I believe some individual cities have weighed in against it as well.
Okay, so it's the title of the bill. Do you have that?
The title
Here.
It's pretty close to what I have there. You want me to read you the exact title?
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I'm just curious. Somebody had referred to it as FutureWise fully funded bill, but I don't know whether that's actually the title on the bill or not. So
that, Commissioner, would not be the legal title. That may be your interpretation, but
that could be
not the legal title.
All right.
On the transportation package, you know that the Senate did pass their version of it. The House is moving it through now. Interesting that, the vote count coming out of the Senate was 29-20, partisan vote. That leads me to indicate that the majority party, that they released this in a joint statement that they believe they have the votes lined up. That's held true so far. It is interesting, though, that I think, you're seeing some building pressure from those in other states. I heard today that the state of Alaska adopted, or excuse me, it was Idaho, adopted a resolution, a floor resolution. I think that's what it was, asking the state of Washington not to do this, unanimously adopted. Also heard the state of Alaska was going to do a tax, an export tax on crude oil. I'm not sure how true that one is, but anecdotally, you're hearing some noise from some of these other states, so we'll have to see how that all plays out. But at this point, I would anticipate the bill to keep moving forward. So those are just some of my own observations about it, just as it's moving along. As I mentioned, the operating budgets were released yesterday. Just at a high level, the Senate budget increased spending, I want to say, by about 4.6 billion as compared to what they had done the previous at this time last year. And the Senate and the House goes, the House goes a little bit further than that. They're closer. I want to say they're about 6. Don't quote me on those exact numbers, though. But that's about the ballpark of it. So they do have some differences between the two that they're going to have to reconcile between now and the end of session. And some of them, it can be relatively significant items that they're going to have to come to an agreement on. Specific to Spokane, the evaluation and treatment proviso that we've had, you'll remember that's the 1.125 million that stayed intact. I expected it to, but I just read it, made a note, wanted to share it with you. The next two are things that were on our legislative agenda with regard to Blake and the Growth Management Act. With regard to Blake, the Senate budget is better. It has additional revenues in it. It also does some things on the what I'd call the administrative side for you. So when folks are seeking their LFOs, they're going to apply and do it directly to the state. The county would be relieved of the administrative burden. And I believe that's a favorable position that we'd like to see happen. Additionally, cities have their own appropriation in the budget. Last year, you might remember there was some cities were advocating that they should get a piece of the dollars that were going to counties. So the way the Senate did this budget, it's a better position for counties to be in, I think is a very fair statement to make. It's not as though the House defunds it. They just don't fund it at the same level. There is a possibility, though, too, that the amount of money the Senate is putting in, there's some question as to whether or not that money will be spent because of just the time frame of the budget, and how long these things do take to process. So there's some unknowns there, but the net is that the Senate's position on this is better for the county right now. And then flipping to growth management planning, we had a line item in our agenda about the GMA and bills that would cost the county money, kind of along the lines of unfunded mandates. The House includes 35 million for planning that's for a couple of bills. You might remember the bill that would add the climate element to the Growth Management Act. I do anticipate that bill to keep moving and passing this session. So along with that will come some planning requirements that will fall onto you all, in addition to a few other GMA bills that are out there. Part of the reason I think that those dollars were not in the Senate budget is most of those bills are being driven out of the House. So it's not uncommon for the House of Origin. If it's a bunch of House bills that do something, the House budget would reflect that, whereas the Senate would not assume it. So that's a kind of a guess on my part. I think it's a good guess, but just an explanation of possibly why those dollars are not in the Senate budget. Just broadly too, you've read and seen that the state has a lot of money. Its revenue continues to grow. And as a result, there's not cuts in this budget. That's just not going to happen in the environment we're in right now. So on the unfunded mandate side, we'd be in pretty darn good shape. They're not going to be cutting back on programs and on different pots of money that you all are able to access from the state. I say that, though, again, acknowledging I haven't gone all the way through the budget yet. I also know WASAC will put out an analysis. They usually do a really good job of a grid sheet that compares the House and the Senate. You'll probably get that, but I'll just re-forward it to you too once I see it. It's usually a really, really good accounting of it. So we'll look for that in the coming days. On the capital budget side, made some notes on some projects that are included in this year's supplemental capital. Keep in mind that's generally smaller because it's not a biennial budget. It doesn't have as many projects in it. But there is one there. You can kind of see the notation there, 375,000 in the House for reintroduction of salmon in the Upper Columbia. That's in the Spokane area. It lists out in Spokane. There's a note by these items in the budget, which county or area they affect. The Mount Spokane Lodge renovation, that is something that we included on our ledge agenda. You might remember that because we didn't have a county specific project, you all had talked to some others in the community, and we agreed to include a few other some other projects from other stakeholders in the area on our list, and that Spokane Lodge renovation was one of them. The Northeast Spokane Community Behavioral Health Center, that's not a project I'm familiar with. I'm sure you all are, but it has 700,000, and what's good about that one is it has money in both the House and Senate budget. The others are listing are either just House or Senate. The Phelps Field Gateway had its money in the Senate. Transitions, I don't know what that is, and maybe you all know what that one is. It was just listed as transitions, 103,000. VOA Veterans Transitional Housing, also one that I'm not familiar with, but again, Spokane area. And then the last one, Commissioners French and Cuny, I talked to you both about this yesterday. Commissioner Kearns, I did not catch up with you. It's $2.2 million in the House budget to deal with some of the mobile home parks that are in the Fairchild base. I don't know if we're supposed to call it encroachment zone anymore, but I think it has to do with that and relocating these folks into some other housing options for them. That money was not in the Senate budget, again, in the House budget. But on the capital side, it's not uncommon for that to happen. Usually the House and Senate differ on capital budget projects, but they always leave enough capacity to negotiate with each other to kind of merge them in. It's not super frequent, super often that, budgets like these community projects come out. I will say that 2.2 million, that's a decent sized amount of money. Just looking at that list comparatively, these others are community projects, and they're usually in that range of, under 500,000 or so. Though the Fairchild base money is in a different part of the budget. It's not a specific community project, but just a little context there on dollar amounts. So that's what I have for now. And as these projects keep moving, we'll come back and revisit once they're adopted. I'm sure we will continue to do our calls until the session's over, and then we'll check off this list and keep updating you on which ones are in and out as we keep moving forward.
So Commissioner French, when Mike called me yesterday, because you know more about the Fairchild base protection than the rest of us. So because I don't remember asking for that. Was that in our capital? It's been in for a long time. I just didn't know if it was in.
So this bill accomplishes two things. One of which is to allow for, out of the funds from the state, allow for relocation cost for the tenants in the mobile home parks. We, in previous allocations, we've secured funding for the construction of the housing, and Community Frameworks, Habitat for Humanity, and Greenstone have built those homes. But what they've discovered is that a lot of these folks don't have the money to physically relocate. And so how do you pay for that relocation? And so one of the things this bill does is it includes a line item to pay for relocation cost. And then I think also in this is the provision for the acquisition of the trailers, mobile home units, and that if the property is rezoned to a different use, but that use is contrary to the JLUS for Fairchild, then the funds have to be repaid to the state. And this is probably more targeted to Airway Heights than it is us. But that provision is in there as well. So other than that, it's more money to continue on with the efforts to provide affordable housing for these folks to move out of the trailer park.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other than that, commissioners, I'm good with things on my end, unless of course you have any other questions or if I've missed anything that you wanted to ask about.
So question for you, Mike, on 5853, the leasing of certain DOT property, is that only I-90 property here in Spokane County, or is that other WashDOT property throughout the state?
I believe, Commissioner, it was very Spokane centric.
Okay,
I'm gonna say, I want to say, how about I'm an 80% yes, and I'm gonna email you 3 with my answer to that once I've read the bill.
yeah, I mean, not a problem. I was just wondering if other communities were experiencing the same kind of dynamic we were experiencing here with regard to housing and homelessness and everything else.
Well, the reason I say that commissioners, that I'm 80% is I do remember there being some dialogue in committee in one of the hearings about that and a concern, I think it was on DOT's end, that this would go beyond the scope of this project specific to Spokane. And so that's why I think it was narrowed to Spokane. That I don't think DOT wanted to see that, but again, I don't want to put words in their mouth. I need to go back and check that. But that's what my memory's telling me. But again, I'm foggy there, so I will message you all and clear that up.
Well, I know that it started out to be Spokane centric, but I didn't know whether some of the other communities in the state were starting to pile on and say, me too.
Yeah, I'd have to, like I said, I'll have to go back and look. I don't think that had happened before. But again, I'll verify it and email you.
Okay.
And I think it's 395 and I-90, not just I-90.
Can you remind me of what the bill number of that was, Mike?
Yeah, it's there. It was 5853.
So I'm wondering, would they be limited on the scope? I'm trying to remember what the title of it was. You said 5853?
5853, an act relating to establishing a limited project regarding leasing certain DOT property. I'm glancing at the bill now. Yeah, the bill specifically says I-90 395 unless the language changed somewhere else.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure if they would be limited based on what the title of the bill was, if they specifically called out I-90 and 395 in the bill, but they're in the title, but they do not.
They did not.
No.
Yes, and yes. So theoretically, you could amend in other areas because of that title, Commissioner. But again, my quick glance was no Spokane specific right now, but I'll take another look and get back to you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mike? Seeing none. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate
Thank
all
you.
the
Have a good day.
Okay. With that, that's going to take us to Scott Chesney and Jessica Pilgrim. I'm not sure, we're like 10 minutes ahead, so I'm not sure if they're on yet or not. I see Scott. Welcome, Mr. Chesney. Is Jessica on?
I
Looks
am.
like she is.
Commissioner.
Oh, there she is. Sorry, a little delay on my end. So there we go. Okay, so the two of you are going to be talking about updating us on a pending matter before the GMA board, 19-CPA-04.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, we are here to report back on some of what we heard from our Planning Commission, but also to give you a briefing of where this action is going. I'm going to turn that over to Jessica, who's got the more complete description, and then we'll take some questions if you have them at the end.
Thank you, Scott. So yeah, commissioners, this is, we're back before you on Dartford, Austin, and And you might recall that we've discussed this briefly before. So this matter is regarding a property that's up north. It's by the Little Spokane area on Dartford and Austin Road. It was a comp plan amendment that was done in 2020, and that was 19 CPA 04. And that comp plan amended 32 acres from rural conservation to mineral lands. And that was later invalidated by the growth board. So what we've been doing since then is kind of deciding how we're going to handle the invalidation. So the reason we're back before you today is we're going to brief you just to bring you up to speed, because upcoming next week, the board will see 2 proposed resolutions. Well, the first one will be next week on March 1st, and that will be receiving the Planning Commission's findings of fact and the summary of public comment that was from their hearing last week. And then on Tuesday, March 8th, the board will see another resolution to consider taking corrective action. So no decision needs to be made today, but we're just bringing you up to speed again before those 2 resolutions come before you. So just briefly to refresh your recollection, this property was a little unique, if you'll recall, in that the center 10 acres was already zoned mineral lands by a hearing examiner decision in the late 80s. But the applicant, Greg Henning, who is the owner of Copper Creek Pools, is trying to change the rest of the area, the 32 full acres around that 10 acres, the additional 20 some acres, from rural conservation to mineral lands, and that's in order to mine sand from the area. Our understanding, based on his testimony last week, is that the sand is not for his pool project necessarily, but it is for community uses. So that's what he currently does with the sand. When the comprehensive plan amendment was proposed, the Planning Commission voted 6-1 to approve the amendment from the rural conservations to mineral lands. In December of 2020, the Board of County Commissioners unanimously approved the amendment. That was later challenged in March of 2021 in front of the Growth Management Hearings Board by the Dartford Austin Neighborhood Group represented by Dave Bricklin. The Growth Management Hearings Board invalidated the comp plan amendment and gave the county until March 14th of 2022. So that is just a couple of weeks away in order to come into compliance. So at this point, there are a couple paths to compliance. The fastest and easiest one, and one that the county often takes, is just simply to rescind the amendment. And that would basically cause the county to be immediately in compliance based on 19 CPO 04, but there's other matters, of course, keeping us from full compliance. Or the county can opt to take corrective action. The action that was invalidated was specifically that the county had failed to give a sufficient amount of time for the public to appeal the SEPA decision. So in order to be compliant, what we would have to do is we'd have to start by republishing SEPA, allowing a SEPA appeal, then taking that SEPA appeal through the hearing examiner, and then after that, taking it back to the Growth Management Hearings Board and hear the remaining issues that are before them, and then try to take any corrective action we'd have to take after that. So again, rescission is the fastest, and we have historically turned to that for the fastest remedy. However, RCW 3670A 132B requires that appropriate public participation be taken before the BOCC takes action to adopt or amend the comp plan. So under that, we took this matter in front of the Planning Commission to obtain that appropriate public participation. That was last week on February 17th, 2022. We took public comment. We did re-advertise the matter. The public submitted 15 written comments, all opposing, and largely the same folks also testified orally in favor of rescission, asking that 19 CPA 04 be rescinded. Their primary reasons will be forwarded to you, but I'll just summarize them briefly. There were concerns about the aquifer. It is over an aquifer recharge area that's sensitive. There are noise and dust concerns by the neighbors from the current existing use, and they're worried about that expanding use. The rural road that this affronts is rather narrow, and there's a concern with the public truck traffic that's already an issue according to them, and they feel that more would be unsafe or bad. Neighbors also had concern with respect to past compliance by the landowner from that 1980s hearing examiner restricted permit on the 10-acre portion. That's not necessarily Mr. Henning, I think he said he came into possession around 2008. However, at the hearing, the applicant and his attorney and the president of JMAC also testified in favor of the continued use and against it being rescinded. All three testified that the sand is used for a number of public purposes. Recently, the sand was spec'd and approved for sports field for the Meade School District, and the sand was in fact used for that, as I understand it. JMAC president also indicated that there's a strong need for sand for cement projects. One of those projects that the sand has been used for historically, and it sounds like it will be used for again, is the north-south corridor and other public purposes. So what the Planning Commission has done is they'll be forwarding to this board for consideration next Tuesday, their findings of fact and just a summary of the public comment. The board, the Planning Commission specifically though, has not made a recommendation, and that's because the RCW really is just allows them to take public comment, and any action that came out of this would be for the board solely because it's undoing a legislative action. So this will come before the board, like I said, next Tuesday to take those public comments that have been summarized and the written public comments, and then set the matter for March 7th for consideration of any remedial action that needs to take place, and we'll provide a proposed resolution on March 7th as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Chesney to fill in any blanks and take any questions.
Scott, you're muted still.
Thank you. I heard the phone was going off and I couldn't shut it off fast enough, so I went to the mute. Thank you, Jessica. There are a couple of alternatives for the property owner. One, and certainly reflecting the fact that mineral resources by GMA are something that have a high priority for their protection and use when they are identified and used in good qualities. The rescission that Jessica is talking about is the fastest way to get in compliance, and that does not preclude the property owner from doing one of two things. One would be applying again in a more proper fashion for a comp plan amendment to accomplish what they tried to do in 2019, 2020. That would take, in a normal case, about a year's worth of time to process. Even though we're trying to go faster now, they've missed the deadline for 21, so it would go into, or 22 rather, that would go into the next cycle. The other is conditional use permit process, which would be considerably faster and would potentially grant that use in a more expedited manner. It does come with a 5-year horizon on that decision that can be extended. So there are those two approaches that the property owner could take to move this forward if the board decided to rescind the project, which, as Jessica said, is the most direct way to bring us back into compliance on that particular issue. If the board wanted to seek other corrective actions, Jessica's laid those out. We can take this back to the hearings board with a new SEPA approach. As I recall, I think we were told that they thought there were other deficiencies in the project, and we all know the hearings board doesn't exactly expedite anything, and so there's the unknown uncertainty of how long that would take to go back through if we were trying to fix the broken pieces part of that. So with that, I think we've laid out where we stand and what the alternatives might be for your consideration. Happy to take your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Chesney? I'm not seeing any at this point in time, Scott. Thank you. You guys gave us a lot of things to think about.
Very good. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, that takes us to miscellaneous items or other matters. Are there any other matters or miscellaneous items to come before the board? Jeff McMorris, I see you unmuted.
Just a quick update, the contracts from GSI from the budget are here. So you will see them on the agenda next week. There's the $200,000 economic development services budget, and then a separate $13,000 Advantage Spokane contract. They both have the standard no fault 30-day termination language, very similar to what you've seen in the past. Scott saw them before he left on vacation, but wanted to give you the heads up, you'll be seeing them next week.
Thank you. Any other items? I'm not seeing any. Okay, then it is 2:35, and that will conclude our afternoon 2 o'clock meeting for Tuesday, February 22nd on 2022. All the twos today. So thank you all very much, and we will see you on Monday.